Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha from the law offices of Samantha Wolfe. We're located at 20 East 6th Street in Suite 206 in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. And you can reach us at 717-655-2676. And thank you so much for jumping on our YouTube channel and checking out this video. We try to do monthly virtual seminars for our clients and our referral sources. And I realized after we've been doing it for about 2 years that it might be interesting and helpful to our audience to hear from different speakers other than just me talking about legal concepts. So we developed a program that we're calling Partnering with the Pros. And what we're doing in this series is we're trying to invite professionals in different areas that we work with. And we wanted to offer an opportunity for you to kind of see a candid conversation between me and that individual, just so you can learn more about what other services there are in the communities, what other professionals you should be talking to as part of your estate planning, business succession planning, or whatever a planning that you're doing at that point in life. So today I have with me Mark Sussman. And just as a little background, Mark and I actually connected on LinkedIn. He reached out to me and sent me a message, and we have had a couple of conversations. And what we both realized we're passionate about is business succession planning. And both of us have actual personal experience with how it either worked well or didn't work well. And so through the course of the conversations, I decided that it might be nice for all of our clients' referral sources to be able to learn a little bit more about what Mark and what he does as part of his business succession approach. So Mark, thank you so much for being here. We're happy to have you. And so today, like I said, we're just going to have a candid conversation between the two of us. And I say that it's candid just because we're going to be talking back and forth, sharing ideas. And as part of that, there will be times when we aren't looking directly at the screen because we're going to be thinking about the best responses. So I just wanted to let you guys know that it's not going to be a traditional me talking, looking straight at the camera. I thought it might be nice just to have the conversation. So I wanted to introduce Mark because we've had such great conversations. I really value his insight and opinions. And I think that he offers something in business succession planning that we don't see a lot of other professionals doing. And I think that it is a value that attorneys can't offer, that an accountant can't offer, that a financial advisor can't offer. I think when you're looking at it from a team approach, what Mark brings to the table is something that none of those other professionals can do. So that's why I'm so excited about today's conversation. But I wanted you to know a little bit of background about Mark before we get started. So I just have a little bit of a biography I want to make sure as a way of introduction. So Mark actually worked with his father to develop a succession plan, resulting in a successful transition of ownership and management of that family business. Since doing that plan or being part of that plan, he often relies on his own experience as an advisor to family-owned and other closely held businesses to help them spot issues related to succession, exit planning, and leadership development. Mark has an MBA from NYU's Stern School of Business, and he lives in Mechanicsburg with his wife, Susan, and their son, Jeremy. So, Mark, again, thank you for being here. We're excited to have you. So I just wanted to start off by giving you an opportunity to tell our audience a little bit about what you do and about your background with your family-owned business that you helped successfully transfer.
So, first of all, Samantha, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for your kind words. And I like the way you asked that question. What do I do and what is my background? Because what I do is because of my background, which you just described. I did grow up in a family-owned business. I left the business thinking I would never come back, but it had been transformed and my father grew it into something else. So I came back into the business and spent a lot of time working with my father on how for us to work together without stepping over each other's toes. And that's essentially exactly what I do now. I am a family business advisor and executive coach for owners of small, closely held businesses. And what I do with my clients is I work with them to ensure that they can reach their goals and how they can best use their business to do that. For family businesses, that of course is very unique because you have family members who have different goals, different thoughts of what to do. So I work with them to figure out what everybody's goals are, to further clarify everybody's goals, and to work for a consensus on how to take the business forward.
So you stepped away from the family business for a while, and then you kind of came back in as part of the transition. Did that time away give you a different perspective when you came back to offer during that transition?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
and absolutely, it showed me how other businesses work. And by the way, to that point, um, good practice for all family businesses is that before a child comes into the business, that they spend at least a couple of years in a different business, so that they can also
Mhm.
learn those other habits and also learn how to be an individual outside of the family. So I always recommend that to my clients.
When you came back to help dad transition, was dad resistant at all about what you had brought to the table, any insights that you were offering, or did he accept them, appreciate them, and allow them to become part of the plan?
If only it was that easy. My father had, I came back in the 90s, and my father had been in the business at that point for 40 years, 40 plus
Right.
years.
Mhm.
And, once we get older, once we're doing something for 40 years, it's resistance. So it took a lot of work for the two of us, a lot of communication between the two of us to make it work.
So, how does having you involved in the succession planning process, how is that helpful to families?
Well, it's helpful in the sense, in just immediately, it's helpful to have somebody there from outside the family, especially somebody there who understands what it's like to go through this, and being able to have that other person to talk to, who doesn't have who it there is no preconceived notions as to what the responses are going to be. It ends up in a much more candid conversation.
Do you think that family members are more honest with you when they're sharing their thoughts, concerns, than they would be if it was just a family meeting where they had to voice their concerns in front of their other family members?
I don't. I'm not sure if honest is quite the word, but I definitely more open. And
Mhm,
I've developed. I've done this long enough that I've developed, and have had enough experience that I've developed my own process for doing it, so that I can elicit thoughts and conversations that are free from the family burden, if you will.
mhm, mhm,
So, and I do that individually at first, so that the people do feel more open to have those opinions, and share those opinions, and then bring everybody together after that, where
mhm.
everything is out in the open. It's a lot easier to have that conversation then.
Mhm. From our conversations that you and I have had, one of the things that I appreciate when we're discussing things is the thought that you put behind your responses and your answers. And I guess I'm using that as a segue because I already think that's one of the really helpful traits that you bring to this process. But I'm interested as to what you think about the way you approach it, your personality, what allows your involvement to make it a more seamless transition?
What I bring to the table is the ability to listen,
Mhm,
and not only just hear the words, but here's what behind the words. As part of that, the other thing I bring to the table is the ability to ask questions, to really dig deep and get into and behind what the person is saying and what their thoughts are. And then, not to be too repetitive, but my
mhm.
experience of having been there, done that, and as well as having worked with scores of other families and business owners over the years.
Do clients ask you a lot about your personal experience when you're helping them through the process?
That's that's interesting. I don't think the answer is yes, but I'm not sure if it's as much of them asking as me hearing something that they said,
Mhm,
or
mhm,
something that's happened, and I can say to them, well, when I was in my family
mhm,
business, And I have used those examples. The
Mhm.
funny thing about that is now that I'm about my father's age when I came into the
Mhm.
business, I can now see it from his perspective, and so I can even
Yeah.
I find myself sharing from his perspective, and sometimes
Mhm.
I even surprise myself because you know what, I wasn't in his head then, but I seem to
Mhm.
be more in his head now.
Do you find that you say things or you have thoughts that you're sure your dad probably had during that process?
Um, sure is a tough word. I do try to channel him. I
Yes.
do try, and hopefully I'm getting there.
I do like that you're coming from a different perspective. So I think so often when I'm helping clients, they see me at the age and experience where I am, which that's helpful. It's helpful to have an attorney that's looking at it one way. But I like that you're kind of in the position where you've seen some successful transitions, you've been through it enough, and you're looking at it from the other side, if that makes sense.
It
You
does.
know, I really think that having those different components as part of a team really help make it the best comprehensive and overall plan that you can have for the family because you have different people looking at it from different viewpoints. And I think that really then ultimately gets the family at the best result at the end.
I agree, and really, the most important aspect that I bring to all of this, whether it's just coaching a family business owner or succession planning, is allowing and bringing insight and perspective to the different family members
Mhm.
so that they can understand each other and better idea
Mhm.
of what they're thinking. And you know, the funny thing is you may walk into a family business and there's a lot of familial conflict, but once they really hear what the other person's thinking, it was like, well, that's what I've been saying, and you find that
Right.
commonality.
hmm I was going to say, do you often sit there and think, well, you're both saying the same things, you're just not hearing it when you're saying it to each other?
Um, I try not to think that. I just try to get the other person to see the light. Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
which
that
I
is true.
really think, I mean, when we're talking, in some ways you act a lot like a counselor of sorts. The kind of the person who's listening and saying, this is what you're both saying. We need to see both sides of this. Do you look at yourself as a counselor in some ways?
Well, um, I have a cousin who's a counselor who would
Yeah.
say, "You cannot say you do," because I'm definitely not licensed. But you know, one of my favorite things to say is, "I'm not a psychologist, but
Yes.
there is an ass in coaching and in working with family business and
Mhm.
working with clients. You know this as well as
Yes.
I do. There's always an aspect of counseling."
Mhm. Absolutely. I think that that's what makes you good at your job, though, is being able to hear what somebody is saying and then provide a thoughtful response. I think a lot of times when there's family dynamics, people have an initial emotional response to things somebody is
Yes.
saying. And I think that when you have somebody there who can kind of take a step back, hear what's being said, but also take the emotional aspect out of it and respond in a thoughtful manner, I think is going to always get you a lot farther.
Absolutely. And in families, those emotions run deep and long.
Mhm.
So, you know, and for instance, a parent who is seeing their child just as that, as a child, because I'm there, I'm able to show them that their child is now an adult and someone
Mhm.
totally different than that and has their own opinions,
Mhm.
and vice versa. You know,
Yeah.
I bring the perspective of having a 23-year-old and understanding what it's like to be a parent and being able to bring that perspective to the children.
Mhm. Absolutely. And sometimes that different perspective helps everybody get on the same page when it comes to putting together a plan. So, talk to me a little bit about what are the risks of not having you involved? Because we talked about all the ways that you add benefit to putting together an estate plan. What risks do we have not having you as a key player in that plan?
Well, the risks come down to family cohesion and survivability of the business. You know, one of the
Mhm.
most famous statistics in our business, and I'm sure you and we've talked about it, is
Yes.
that study that showed that 30% of family businesses survive into the second generation. Only one
Mhm.
third of them. surviving into the third generation is barely over a tenth of them. And
Mhm.
then a meager 3% survive into the fourth generation or beyond. And if you look at the other statistics that I've done some research and found
Mhm.
other studies that show that 77% of failed family businesses in bankruptcy ended up there after the unexpected death of the owner. 97% of those failed business after an owner's death did not have a succession plan. And the
Mm.
result is, of course, the failure of the business, but even worse is 81% of failed family businesses were negatively impacted by family conflict, most likely because there was no succession plan or no clear path forward.
Right. So I think those statistics tell us how important that transition really is. So it's great that you put all this time, effort, money into building up this business, but if you can't transition it well, what did you really accomplish? That's where it really kind of falls apart. And those statistics are so helpful, but let's talk about that a second. So in my experience, when we're doing a succession plan, I see it most often fall apart. And this is just my experience, not from um, father or parent to child. It's usually when it goes from child to grandchild, when it's making that, second big transition. But I don't actually think, in my experience, when I've seen that, I don't think it's really that there was so many issues with that second transition. I think a lot of it was there wasn't the solid foundation laid
Yeah.
in the business when it transitioned to the first time. So, it kind of creates all these cracks in our foundation. If we're thinking of it of like a house, when you lay that really solid foundation, have a good plan in place, and you transition at once, it should work. But it also has a trickle down effect. If you can't do the first transition well, you're not going to be able to do the second transition well. So I think it's all about laying that really solid, firm initial foundation when you're making the first transition. Tell me your thoughts about that. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. The actions we take are modeled on the actions we learned, especially
Yes.
from parent to child and so forth.
Hmm.
Yeah, and to your point, laying that foundation is, I don't care what anybody says. Some people will say there are natural born leaders.
Right.
Leadership is learned.
It is.
And
Hmm.
that is part of one of the things I work on. If I get in early enough into the family, I help set up, I help them learn, I help the next generation learn leadership,
Mm.
and also help guide the older generation, the founding generation or the second generation in your example, on how to mentor their child on being a leader and being a good steward of the family and the business.
When you have been involved in the leadership cult of, here's that word again, cultivating the leader.
Yeah.
I'll just rephrase it like that. When you've been involved in that, have you ever seen it not work if you're laying the good foundation and you're cultivating that new leader? Have you ever in your experience seen it not work successfully?
No. And
Mhm.
but that's a trick question too.
Mhm.
Sometimes in a succession plan leads to the discovery that the child came into the business out of obligation,
Oh,
and
interesting. Right.
and
Yes.
that's not what they wanted to do,
Mhm.
and they wanted to do something else. So in that sense, the child may say, you know what, I'm going to go off somewhere else and do something else. And I think that is a successful lesson in leadership.
Mhm.
I
It
also tell
is.
my clients what that's called is a subsidiary
Mhm. I
of
like
the
that.
of the original family
Yes.
business.
Yes, because I also think at the end of the day, that's not a bad result. Because
Yeah,
if you don't have somebody who actually wants to be in there working in the business, again, I feel like that's going to affect anything that comes after that individual that's just in there out of obligation. There's not the passion, there's not the drive to really push the business forward. So I think ultimately that's still a good result because then you can identify the person that can do it and wants to do
right,
it.
right,
So I
exactly.
still think that's so helpful to be able to do that.
And
Absolutely.
and it also ends up in a better relationship between
Mhm.
the older generation and the child.
Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of times you want to keep these relationships intact. If it's a family business, they felt strongly about these other family members. They all kind of joined this great passion that they had, that at the end of the day, those need to still be healthy relationships too.
Well, after all, what's more important, the family
Mhm.
relationships or the business relationships?
Well, and if the family relationships are healthy, it makes for a healthier business relationship.
Absolutely.
So
I
they
agree.
kind of
I
feed off
agree.
of each other that way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, talk to me a little bit about, in your experience, how long does it take to accomplish a successful business succession plan?
Um, you know, it how long it takes to actually accomplish and complete a
Mhm,
succession,
mhm,
that varies because of the complexity of the business, the complexity of the family,
mhm,
how much the family has how well and how much the family has been communicating with each other, how many children, how many family members are involved, and also just the circumstances. I think your question might also be asking how long am I involved in it?
yes, yes.
And usually documenting what the succession plan is, and working together to get everybody together on the same page usually takes about 3 to 6 months. Then my own involvement it's up to the families as to whether or not they want to continue with working with me.
Mhm,
Many of my family clients have continued to work with me in my role as a coach, either to the CEO or other family members or other people in the business. And some of my family clients, especially the children, talking about that leadership, they
mhm.
like joining my peer advisory group. I have a peer advisory group for business owners, and they're able to learn leadership and lots of other lessons from the other business owners.
I do think that when you go to the time, trouble, and expense to set up a business succession plan, from a legal perspective, I always encourage these family businesses to meet at least annually, because most of the time in Pennsylvania, depending on how the business is legally set up, you're going to want to have an annual meeting anyway. So I think it at least needs to be touching base on a business level annually. What are your thoughts about that?
Family clients, partnerships, all my clients, I encourage them to do exactly what you said, to
Mhm,
meet. If, actually, I encourage them to meet quarterly, if not monthly, to
mhm,
have those deep conversations about where the future is,
mhm,
what direction are we headed. And to add to that, I had a client who was a family-owned business, and their annual meeting, they involved them flying out to Utah to go skiing. They would start their week out there with the family business,
mhm,
and then they would go skiing and have fun and really join together, have fun and connect
mhm,
as a family
mhm.
and as the partners.
Mhm. I know that when I read a lot of books, for example, about how to properly own a business or ways to motivate your employees, not in a family owned business, just in a business in general, they talk a lot about like team building activities that you should be doing, just having fun together,
Yeah.
because it really does have a bonding effect. Why do you, every time you want to see a family member, if it's a family owned business, why do you always want to talk business? You don't. You want to still be able to enjoy them, whatever their role is in your life outside of the business, whether it be a sibling, a parent, anybody else like that. I think so often we miss that part of it. We don't remind people they need to not just be meeting, on a regular basis, quarterly about the business, but you also need to be investing in those relationships outside of the business.
Absolutely. You have to remember why you're there, and part of why you're
Mhm.
there are those relationships.
Absolutely. Because otherwise, you could just hire anybody and have any old business partner. But you've chosen, in this case, to be in business with your family members. So there has to be a reason. You had to have enjoyed their personality on some level, hopefully. So I think that we have to be better at reminding clients to focus on that too. And I think that that then helps those business relationships.
It does, and you comment about why did you choose that to go into the family business, hopefully it wasn't just out of obligation. It has to be more than that. And sometimes you have to look for that reason. Or
Mhm.
like I said, sometimes you just have to, for lack of better words, fess up and say, you
Mhm.
know what, I think, Dad, Mom, I think you would be better off with hiring somebody else. I don't have that motivation, which is what
Right.
you said earlier.
Mhm. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about when we're talking about business succession planning, we want to have a good team in place. So typically, we'll have like an accountant, we'll have an attorney. In your experience, what is the proper role of an attorney and a financial advisor for the succession plan?
Well, the succession plan, I told you we were talking about this yesterday, and I mentioned yesterday about the banker was a very bright banker who said to me, "When you start a business, you should know your exit plan right then and there."
Mhm. Mhm.
And to that point, when you're doing a succession plan, it really starts with figuring out what the founding generation, the older generation, the parent generation's goals are at the end.
Mhm.
So I urge them to meet with their financial advisor with their wealth planner and figure out what their needs are going to be and how that is going to be satisfied. How are they going to get the funds? The other aspect of that is you then start should include how the younger generation is going to finance the purchase of the organization. And I'm a strong believer that it should there can be gifting involved, but there should be some form of purchase because when you get something for free, that's the value of what you're getting.
Mhm.
Free, no value. And the attorney plays a very important part in that too. We've talked about your background and what happened in your family, and the lack of financial planning, the lack of tax planning, caused a disruption in the family business.
Mhm.
It's so important to work with an attorney who is knowledgeable about trusts and about how to pass a family business down, such as yourself.
Mhm.
The other aspect of it is in succession plans that I help the family put together, we're creating roles, we're creating dynamics, we're creating policies, we're creating
Mhm.
rules. That's how best to mitigate the family emotions in the business. It is so much more impactful to take those to an attorney and
Mhm.
have them memorialize those in legal documents, let alone the buy-sell agreements and the partnership agreements that governments and inheritance requires us to do.
Mhm. Yeah, and I might take an atypical approach than most attorneys in the sense that I don't think that attorneys by nature can always do everything to meet the family's needs in business succession planning. I think that's why it's so important to have a financial advisor. That's why it's so important to have someone like you involved in the planning, because I don't think an attorney is equipped to time wise or capability wise to address all of these things that have to be flushed out even before you get to the legal documents. And I like what you said about how when you start a business, you should already be thinking about how you're going to be exiting it. Because I think so often we focus as business owners on the here and now. How do I keep this business going? How do I make payroll? How do I bring the revenue in? And we forget to think about what happens if I'm not here? How
Yeah.
does this transition? What is the way in which I'm going to get out of this when I leave and still leave it as a healthy business? So I like that when we're talking about business succession planning, your school of thought is you should be thinking about it even as you're starting a business. You should be thinking about how to exit and leave it in a healthy place. And I think we need
Absolutely.
to be better at telling that to clients. So when clients are coming in here and they're talking about starting a business, we need to start having the conversation of you're starting it. Have you thought about how you're going to be exiting it when that time comes? Because even now on my insurance paperwork for my here at my office, I have to provide like policies and procedures. What would happen if something happened to me? How would the business unfold? Who would come in if anything? How would it be wound up? And I think that we have to be advising clients to be able to be thinking about that right at the beginning so that it's not such a shock when a transition has to happen. And so it's starting at the very beginning with that mindset. And I think that's really important. And we need to do better. And by we, I mean the attorneys need to do better at really making sure that clients know that. To your point, and when we're talking about my family situation, being an attorney now and looking back on it, I don't think my dad got the best legal advice. I don't think enough discussions were had about the tax implications and what it meant for him. So I think for attorneys and accountants, and even you, we need to be willing to have those tax questions and
Yeah.
answer them and really flush them all the way out, and not just talking about death taxes, but talking about income taxes, transfer taxes. What does this look like for the family? And being able to lay that all out so that when the family's trying to figure out the best way to do it, they know all the different options. I think
Yeah.
that's important.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it takes a team to have a successful succession plan. I know that there are tax there are methods to avoid that inheritance tax sucking all the money out. There are methods for getting that successful transition, but I don't know the taxes. I don't know the
Right,
tax law.
right,
I've never worked. I mean, I don't even do my own taxes. How could I possibly know? So I
right.
know to go to someone like yourself, who does know that and who is an expert at it and has seen it firsthand.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about the team approach because I like to think about things in analogies. I like to paint a picture. So let me paint something here. You let me know, does this seem to link up with what you're thinking? Okay. So if we imagine a business as a boat that's in the middle of the ocean, and all of the family members who are part of it or running it are there on the boat, they all have different roles. And our goal is to try to get this ship to shore. That's what we're trying to do. So, as I'm listening to you talk and what your role is, you remind me so much of the person who's up in the crow's nest with that telescope, kind of seeing the shore, seeing where we need to get to, and navigating the ship so that we can reach the shore. Does that seem to properly illustrate what your role is in this?
I love that analogy. You know, the guiding the ship to its safe harbor. I
Mhm.
think the one thing I might change about that analogy is I am up there on that crow's nest with the telescope, but rather than seeing when we're at our destination, I'm
Mhm.
looking to see whether there are any icebergs there and whether we're going to hit
Mhm.
an iceberg.
Mhm.
Really, the navigator
Mhm.
is the family. The
Yeah.
captain is the family. I just help them avoid the icebergs.
Or the rocks or all of those things that could pop up that could prevent them from reaching the shore.
Right.
And then if we take that illustration further, I think the accountant and the attorney's job is to give those people on the boat the proper equipment to be able to do what they need to do. So if you're up in the crow's nest, kind of looking for all these pitfalls, icebergs, things that we could run into, I think as attorneys, our job is to make sure if the family is rowing to shore and we have the captain as a family member kind of navigating it, our job is to get them the equipment they need, whether that be oars or proper documentation. Ours is all about logistics, getting the logistics to them so that they can accomplish and then be able to dock in a safe harbor. And I think that's important. So everybody has their role and it all comes together so that we can do that.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, good. Because I think that that's helpful for our clients to kind of know how everybody works together. Absolutely. So describe to me your process when you do this. It sounds like it's a lot of listening and talking to the different family members. Is that a proper recap of what your role is in the process?
Exactly. The first thing I do is I meet with. There is one person in the family gets in touch with me. I meet with them. There's no cost to that. I can't charge a client if I don't know we're a good fit. So the
Right.
first thing is we have an initial consultation where we both figure out whether or not I'm the right person for them, and if our personalities and my experience fit their needs.
Mhm.
And then the next thing I do is I meet with all the key players individually, again, to get to allow them to have that opportunity to say what is really on their mind without having the family history.
Mhm.
And then from that, I find the consensus, and then together we come up. I don't write the success. I formalize the succession plans.
Right.
I don't think up what's in them. The family does,
Mhm. Right.
and that's really my process.
So the initial is an interview on both sides to make sure that
Yeah,
you are a good fit, they are a good fit, and that you should be a part of this process.
right. And at the
Okay.
beginning of that consultation, one of the first things I say, at the end, we'll make a mutual decision.
So talk to me a little bit about how you do get compensated for what your role is in the business succession plan.
I charge a retainer, and the
Okay.
reason it's a monthly retainer, based on the initial conversation and a better understanding of what the business and the family are about, I can pretty much figure out how long it's going to take. So we set up a monthly retainer, and the reason why I do a monthly retainer is that way the business owner can come to me with any issue. I always have business owners come to me with marketing issues since that was
Mhm.
my forte before I went into coaching,
Right.
and or even management issues, problems with employees. They may come to me with questions and asking for guidance, and that way I
Mhm.
can give it to them without either one of us worrying about it being on the meter and getting
Mhm.
charged by the hour.
So somebody is listening to this and wants to know how to get you involved in the process. How would they reach out to you? What's the best way to do that?
Well, they could do it by email, which is my email is mark@strategicbizgroup.com. That's strategic bizgroup.com. They can call me at 717-439-6254. And the easiest way to find me is to go on my website, which is strategicbusinessgroup.com.
And what we'll do, Mark, just so that in case anybody didn't get to jot that down, we'll put all of that information right in the description of the video. So if
Well,
they
thank
want to
you.
reach out to you, they have all of that right there that they can do that. They can also reach out to our office and we can make the contact with you if they want to do that.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely. And tell me a little bit, just in closing, if you had to recommend any resources for clients, a great place to get started, any books, what's your recommendation about how to get the best information?
Well, I'm looking over your shoulder at your book. Really need to know. You sent that to me, and I was so grateful because I know that you contributed to two
Yes.
chapters in it,
Mhm.
and you in one chapter you do a really great job of laying out what goes into a succession plan from your perspective. In the other chapter, you share a little bit about your own family's history, and I thought that was a great.
Yes.
The other book that I always recommend to my family businesses is every family's business. It includes, I don't know if you can read it, includes 12 common sense questions to protect your wealth. And really, it's he writes it as a fable about two family businesses, one who successfully made that transition, and it was all based on communication, and the other one who
Mhm.
didn't have that communication, and the family and the business were being ripped apart. Those 12 common sense questions are a wonderful tool for families to review where the business is headed and what to do next. And so much so that I adapted it a little bit, and I send it to my family owned businesses so that they have that as a tool so that they can use it and promote that communication.
Absolutely. And that book they can just get like off Amazon or any book distributor that they can.
Amazon
Okay,
Amazon has it.
great.
Or they
And
can they can get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to share the questions.
perfect. Perfect. And then I did want to let everybody know who's watching, we do a quarterly newsletter, and Mark was kind enough to contribute an article to that. So we'll be featuring him in our newsletter along with an article that it's actually the excerpt from the book talking about the succession plan and my personal experience. So that's actually going to go out at the end of April. So everybody will be able to read Mark's article as well as kind of my family background with business succession planning. I thought it would be nice to tie it in, and then if they wanted to watch the video again, newsletter to kind of went hand in hand. So just in case anybody wants to be able to read something to have some other material, it will be featured in our newsletter. In closing, Mark, is there anything else you would like to say about the business succession planning process?
Something that no one ever said to me when I was in my family business, you're not the only one going through this. You don't have to go through it alone. There are, if they call me, if they call you, Samantha, if they call somebody else, that's the most important thing. Know that you're not alone and that there are resources out there to help you.
Absolutely. And again, we always really do advocate for that team approach just because then everybody's being seen, everybody's being heard. And I do feel like when you have those professionals come together, you're always going to end up with a better plan at the end of the day.
Absolutely. 100%.
Thank you so much for doing this video, for answering our questions. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new, even if it's just in the way you respond. I feel like you have a neat, unique way of talking through things that always makes me feel like I'm wiser than I actually am. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that, for being on here. And I'll look forward to talking to you in the next couple of months and in the future. So thank you, Mark, for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody. This is Samantha at the law offices of Samantha Wolfe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Always feel free to check out our YouTube channel for other videos. And thank you, Mark, for joining us for this month's version of Partnering with the Pros. Thank you so much.